Hello and welcome to the next video in the MeanStackJS. In this video, we're going to be talking all about the top 10 things we think you can do to improve your API and to make it a little more sustainable and production ready. So let's get started. First thing on the docket is app param. We think this goes unused a lot and we think it's really beneficial and awesome. And you can come in the express.js API reference and check it out for yourself. We'll give a quick glance at it right here. If you declare on the app that you got a param, you want to give it a name, this param is usually illustrated by this below. You see the route they actually hit. But you'll see it's illustrated that this app param, if you have the ID and you have a route and you tell it specifically that you have an app param called ID, it'll match these two things up and say, oh, you got an ID? Well, let me run this app param right here. And you'll notice it says it's only called once. And then the other ones can use the information and benefit from it. Well, this doesn't illustrate totally, but what you can do, and this is what we recommend, which we're going to show now, is you can have an app param, specifically something like, hey, blog ID, and then use it throughout the rest of the API. And in the case where blog ID is there, that'll kick off our param blog controller function. And what that specifically will do, we'll get into some of this other stuff later, but what this will specifically do is get the blog based on the ID that was sent in. So once we get that back, we assign that to the requester object saying, hey, request, add a blog variable and add the data in. So anything after this function will have access to it. So in this case, the next function to be called is going to be auth is authorized, and we're going to check that you have access to this blog to say delete it. But all of these blogs functions will have access to it. For example, this blog get by ID, all we have to do is do a respond req blog because we used the param blog. Wow, that's quite a way to say that, blog. So this is one thing we think goes extremely underestimated that you could easily add in your code today, or just take heed of this example with the blog package. So number 2, what's next on our list? Number 2 is the express next. If you've properly configured your error handler, you should seriously consider always passing in the next variable. It's always there, but you should always use it and declare it there. And we say that because if you do run into error, don't try to handle it here. Don't try to get all fancy with a bunch of handlers. We see people do it all the time and we're just sitting there shaking our heads like, no. The only time we think it's okay is if you're trying to validate some errors, and we'll get into how this validate works. And then maybe you just want to return it here because there's no need to go through anything else. And we think that's okay, but majority of the times when you get errors back from, let's say, Mongoose or somewhere else, you don't know what happened. Neither of us do. So don't try to put logic everywhere in your controllers, and just pass it off to next. If you pass in something into next is going to assume it's an error. And if you properly configured, like we talked about, like we have over here in the error.js, we have this, we've set up this middleware, which specifically has a fourth parameter called error. This is where this next gets called and will get sent to. So it will get sent right to here. And so you see, we already have the error handling in for validation errors, casting errors, Mongo errors, and then properly formatting an error message so you as the admin can understand it. And then based off which level you're in, this will send back, based off your production or not, it'll send back something different to the user because you don't want to give them all the good information. You should save a lot of it for yourself. But nonetheless, number 2 is using the next properly. So if you get an error and you need to handle something, just call next. It is the best way to handle it, especially if you have it set up correctly. And you'll see that throughout the blog. We do that. That's what we do. We just return next error. It's simple as that. Keep running on, keeps the controller clean, running smoothly, especially if you wrote a good error handler. That's the key. Now, this gets me into my next thing that we were just talking about, which is, we're going to scroll back over here for a second. Scroll up, the error handler for the route. How do you protect your routes? That's another question. Well, this is number 3 on the list. This is something we think you guys could easily add in. It's already in the system and integrated, and we actually have, if we come, we'll get into custom filters in a second that we've already added in. But this right here is a way to validate what's getting passed in and protect your API. The package is called Express Validator. It's a middleware to validate what's coming through. So specifically, let's go look at their example. So when something's coming through, you can validate by doing a check, saying you want to check the body or check the params or check query. Because in Express, there's 3 different ways to get data. Well, you could just use the Express or REQ assert, and it'll check all 3 types. And then you can just chain some of these validators on. These options specifically actually come from the validation package. This is actually based off another package, but this is the Express version. Same concept, but you can go find all of these things that you can chain off, like is not empty, is an integer, is alpha. And you can also sanitize the information if you really need to. So what it looks like then, well, I don't want to get in the rest of this, but you can come check it out. But what it looks like ends up being is you say you want to assert that someone passes a name through. We could also assert that there's maybe a user dot name, whatever it might be. And then we can say that, hey, it cannot be empty. And so this is a way to protect your APIs, to build in these checks here to say, hey, if someone didn't send me something, cut it out, validate it, check it. And so how it works is you set them up, you declare them, you chain them, and then something like on 54, you actually call REQ validation errors and assign it to a variable. And this will create an array of errors or validation errors per se. And in this case, we always just want to respond back with the first one. If you have multiple ones, that's great. We just want to respond back with the first one. But the nice thing about this is you can protect your API and not even run in the rest of this. Because if there's an error, it will return and stop running the code right here. So it will never even get to here. So this is another way to protect your API. And this is why it's number 3 on the list. It's fantastic to use this Express Validator. And it's going to make a world of difference for you to protect your API. Next thing that you can do, and this is number 4 on the list, is something called Express Query Parameters, which is something we actually built here at GPS. Now, what is Express Query Parameters? Well, it allows you to, for one, protect your API, but at the same time, open your API up to take in and handle people querying against it and make it a fully fledged API that can, well, how to put it, take options, takes limits, sorts, takes all these things in a matter of seconds now. So you don't have to go write logic to check the limit, make sure it's a number, check the sort, make sure it's in your schema. And that's also how you protect it. You tell it what your schema is. You tell it what you want to let people query on against you. So like if they make up some crazy name and try to inject something, it can't be done. It has to be one of these 5 things. And even then, you could, if you wanted to, add in some options to say, it's an email, one's an array, one's something, whatever it might be. So by simply adding this in, and by the way, this is already added in our stack. It's pretty freaking awesome. It's already added in, but this is where it's number 4 on our list because all you have to do is use it. And using it is literally, because it's on every, when it's integrated, it's on every request or every route. You have access to this req.query parameters, which will give you access to, I'm going to come down over here, system controller. There's a file. There's already a simple implementation of it to show you guys. And I do believe it was API testing. Was that the one? Yes, it was testing. So if we go to API testing, we come back over to the Mean app. You'll notice it's going to respond back with all the information we have. And so you'll notice that right now it's just a bunch of blank information. These are the defaults. You can change them up. And here's all the actions you can do that are integrated with Mongoose. So now you can handle, and if we go back over here and see where we have it registered in routes. Actually, no, we have it registered in the config. So we can actually use email and come back over here and email equals JSON. And now, so the filter, if you guys will notice, the filter is now here. So it says filter email JSON. We can also try adding in some other garble. And you see nothing comes in. That's because it wasn't in the schema, so it's not allowed to come through. Now this will make more sense when I come up and show you the blog package on lines 20 to 26. You'll notice here that we are using RQ query parameters. So if the filter's here, that's what it's going to use to find. If there's a where, it's going to use that. If there's a sort, so we can start, we make our API fully ready to be queried. Ready to go. So now we could do limit equals 10. You see the number changes. Skip equals 1. So it's going to skip 1. We could do and where date. Actually, I don't even know if that was a, let me go back and make sure it's in the schema. I don't think it is. Created. Where created is greater than 2016-10-10. And now you'll see there is a where object that actually already has a formatted string ready to go to inject straight into, well, your blogs in this case. Now, there's some error checking. There's a lot of other things that go on behind the scenes with the express query parameters to make sure that these things are legit and come through properly. Now, this can be very powerful for you, but at the same time, you might want to protect your things even more and just not let people even query against it. That's fine. You don't even have to use it. You don't even have to use any of that stuff. You could still use the regular RQ query. You could use the params. You could use the body, whatever it might be. But that's number 4 on our list because some of the functionality and power it has. So number 5 is something called run auto. So it determines in the best order to run asynchronous functions. And really what it's doing is it's control flow. It allows you to go back and forth between asynchronous and synchronous calls really by, well, it's all asynchronous calls, but it allows you to do this in order, in parallel, or you can tell it to wait on something. So like this write file has to wait to get data make folder before it can run. Since these two don't have anything here, they just have functions, they run simultaneously at the same time together. Whatever one is the best order will run first. And so you can control the flow here of how you want it to go. So a great way to use this, much like in blogs, is in this case, since one didn't determine on the other, we just run them at the same time. So you can run a bunch of calls together. So this is why it's number 5 on our list, is because you can use it to get 10 different Mongo calls per se at the same time. And instead of, chalking up 500 milliseconds per call, we're talking 500 milliseconds for all the calls. And now your data is there. Now, with that being said, you can use async or any of these other libraries out there that control the flow or control processes and how it goes in order and timing. You can use any of them. You can even switch over to promises if you'd like. That's totally fine. We just recommend in number 5 you use something that allows you to run things in parallel and control the time easily without having to do callback hell. No one likes callback hell. Let's be honest about that. It's just not pretty and not fun and not sustainable for your API. So let's talk about something else you can add in. This is number 6 on the list. And I'm going to pull it up over here over the Express Query AutoParser. This is another one we wrote that we think that between this and Safe Regex are great to toss in to work with. So first, we'll go back to AutoParser. It's something, this is one we built, but this one is specifically to help you in your API. If you've got something that you need to have in a specific format, or you need to make sure it is there exactly as you're expecting it, you can just run AutoParse and parse out whatever's coming through. You can even tell it the type. So if you need something to be specifically a type, no matter what you're passing in, you can pass in the constructor with it to make it whatever you so wish. So even dates, even if you have a custom function you want to pass in to work with colors, whatever it might be, This is a great little tool to use, and it's already integrated in the system because we use it in other places, so it's a great little tidbit to add in. Something else good we do, or we can do, which is not technically integrated in the system, but I know I want to put it in here because some people ask me, because they do some regex stuff. Add this in, protect yourself. If you're doing something with your API where you need some regex, this is something you got to do. Hands down, I'm just going to say it. The next thing that we're going to recommend as number 7 is something you guys all might be familiar with, LoDash. This is our number 7. Why? Because it's a style, it's a standard, it's a lifestyle. It's fantastic, but at the same time, you can know that it is written the best possible way with the most test cases behind it. And you can use it on the front end, the back end, but at the same time, in your API specifically, it is fast, it is extremely reliable, and it makes your life easy without having to go build a ton of logic. There is an absolute ton of info out there on it, and they have great documentation. Let's go down. Actually, I think they have it up here. Oh, here we go. They have absolutely fantastic documentation. And this takes care of almost any utility function you might ever need. And utility functions are used all the time in APIs. Let's be honest, when the business partner asks you to give some type of crazy functionality in API, marrying up a couple mail servers together with a couple old marketing mail servers, there's a lot of random things that need to go on. And this thing can handle all those utilities to marry data together for you, or to pull things out, or to find things for you. It's a fantastic package to improve your API and to make it really, really robust and useful with a bunch of utilities that can save you time in trying to build out extra crazy logic because it's already been done. Don't go and reinvent the wheel. Number 7, LoDash. Number 8, Debug. This is a small debugging utility, but it is great in the API. Now, I know recently in release 1.7, we added in Winston with a logger that's an async logger that you should use all the time. We thoroughly believe that. But at the same time, when we're debugging, there's this awesome tool called Debug that we already actually use all throughout the system, if you noticed. But they never show up unless you go physically turn it on by telling it, whether you're in Windows or if you're in PowerShell, or if you're even in like Mac or Linux, you can use export, not that. You can use export. That will tell the debug module to actually start logging things out. But this debug module runs a lot deeper. Majority of all NPM packages run this. And I'd say majority of all the big boys run this. You see how many downloads it gets in a month? Let's be honest. There's a ton of packages using it. So once you actually turn it on, use star, this will log everything. You could tell it to just log your specific controller, or specifically like MeanStack::blog. If you just do MeanStack star, that would log everything in the MeanStack out, which is great. But if you just want to log the blog, that's even better. So this is a great way to debug with your API and to figure things out in the entire system and how to work with it. And so at the same time, you can rely on this a lot better than leaving in some logs or console logs. And I'm not saying you're going to turn this on in your production server by any means. But when you're working with it before you get there, this is a great little tool to have. All right, number 8 was debug. Number 9 is middleware. This is something, let me close these. This is something that goes unused a bunch. Middleware. So our middleware is ready for you. It's how you're going to protect your API. All you have to do is call it. It's passed in whenever you have a router like such. We pass in the auth, which is really just middleware. So it's these 5 pieces of middleware, and these 5 pieces will keep your routes safe. They are not the first line of defense, but they are the defense line. They are what is going to check to make sure that someone's logged in. They're going to check, in our case, they check whether they're actually logged in through the system or they actually have a real token. And if they're not any of those, well, you're gone. See you later. These are great things that go unused. That all you have to do is say auth.is authenticated. Auth.is authorized through the blog if you go look up how that function works. Number 9 is middleware. Have the proper middleware in place, which we do, to authenticate and protect your system. It's got to have it, but then again, you got to use it. We don't always use it because sometimes we don't want to protect these routes. We want to be open to the public, but all these other routes we need to protect. End of story. So that's number 9. And lastly, number 10 is follow a standard. This is how you can make your stuff more production ready, more stable. Our standard is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to declare at the top of each file. And actually there's going to be a style guide to come out soon from us. So you'll see more, but we want to, specifically in our standard and style, we want to declare first. Declare what the file is going to do. What kind of things can you expect? Next, set up all of our variables. Do whatever we need to set stuff up, whether it's variables or something like get something else from another file, whatever it might be, set up. Next is going to be utilities. There are no utility functions in this specific file, but helper functions, utility functions, whatever you want to call them, go next. And then lastly are all the main core logic functions that you declared at the top. So like that's what we do and what we follow. So everywhere you go now, that's what you're going to notice in our stack. But at the same time, for you guys, who's ever listening to this, by all means, find a style and follow it. Whether it's ours, whether it's someone else, just follow it, because that already will make your code and take it up another notch, another level in the game. So that's number 10. In review, the app params is huge. Using next appropriately is huge. Using something like express validator to validate what's coming in is even bigger. But at the same time, if you want to open up and save time, you need to use something like express query parameters to open your API to be queryable. And then you need to take steps take action into making sure you can handle multiple database calls at the same time by using some control flows, or like something like async or some promises, something of that nature, to keep control of how it's all going for you. You also can use packages like AutoParser or say Regex. Definitely look into some utility package like LoDash. Save you a ton of time and make your API more robust instead of you trying to write all the logic out yourself. Number 8 was debug. Number 9 was definitely use the middleware. And lastly, like we were just talking about, the standards and styles. These things are all huge. Please, by all means, try them all out. Use them. Everything you saw is in the blog package. Everything I talked about is in the style of how this blog controller specifically works and how the whole blog module works. So by all means, check out the example we've provided for you and implement it all yourself and use it. And I guarantee you, if you can implement these things, it'll up and bump up the level of code you're writing, and it will make you a better developer, make your API a better API, and make you more protected and better off and stable. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helps. Please, by all means, leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts. Leave an issue if you see anything up with the code, and we'll be in touch. Have a great day.